And we are live. Welcome, alienated parents, grandparents, alienated children, family, friends, to Let's Talk. Today is April 25th, Parent Alienation Day worldwide. And I have guests today that will be coming on periodically over the next few hours to share stories. A quick story on how they are dealing with parent alienation. They're here to say hello to their children. Um, it's just a worldwide pandemic that we're dealing with, and people out there need to know how serious this is. So, welcome. We have our special guest today. We have oh my God, Dolores Feliciano, and we have Charlie McCready. I'm going to let Dolores take the floor first. She's got to go back to work. Parents, we do whatever we have to in order to, bring recognition to the world on what we deal with on daily basis. So Dolores is one of my great examples. And I mean, look behind, you'll see a Christmas tree. Dolores has not given up, and nor will she, and it lights up. Welcome, Dolores. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And, I'm so sorry that you're going through all this. Please tell our viewers how long you've missed your child, your daughter, and give us a brief detail on what you're going through.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mary, for having me on once again. It'll mark 10 years this coming January. The tree that you see behind you, I keep up all year round. I just started that tradition. And today, especially today, it is decorated for Parental Alienation Awareness Day. I have the green feathers around, and I also have the yellow ribbon. Tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree. And that gives me a little hope, it's in hopes that she's either seeing this now or has been seeing or is able to see the journal that I've created for her on Facebook, and to let her know that we will always be here and we will always love her, and we've never given up, and nor will we ever give up on her, or just knowing our door is always open to her, has always been. And whatever it is that she's being told, I know it's not her doing, and it's not her fault. None of this is her fault. And there's no guilt to be had. So, Melanie, I love you, sweetheart. And I'm your number one cheerleader, always and forever. And I just wanted to briefly give a shout out to several states in the United States that has actually made this day a proclamation day. To being a Parental Alienation Awareness Day, April 25th. Shout outs to San Antonio, Texas, and a shout out to Sacramento, California, and Canada, who has made this day, April 25th, Parental Alienation Awareness Day. Congratulations, that's a great feat. I know that feat because I personally had worked very hard with my senators and my state to make a proclamation day for being Parental Alienation Awareness Day. To no avail was I successful because, well, I live in New York State, and unfortunately I was told that this topic is too controversial. So we're going to have places throughout that find it too controversial, too political, on and on. But to me, every day is Parental Alienation Awareness Day. Every day. And the more that I hear of targeted parents approaching me, emailing me, and I do on a constant basis, the more I will continue to support, the more that I will continue to give the information that I've learned over the years to educate, and to also educate the next generation. This is has been an ongoing worldwide pandemic of its own. And we have to educate, because until Congress decides to reform, this won't change. And those that are alienating more than likely have been alienated themselves or have gone through same sort or similar sort of abuse themselves. And this is what they grew into being without having to be self-aware and get self-help. And it's become a vicious cycle. So I believe in order to stop this cycle, we just have to educate. Educate. Knowledge is the greatest power, and love is everlasting. So when we continue to give this, I think we have promise and we have hope. So coming from New York, Long Island, New York, I've given out my shout out, and I will continue to make awareness of parental alienation. And I know everyone out there knows somebody that is going through similar experiences of this, or they know of someone who has. And unfortunately, it's fell silent because a lot of people don't want to be either recognized about it, or they don't want to know about it because it's not happening to them. And that's the sad thing. The children are the ones who do get hurt the most. And that's been implanted in my mind all these years from what I've been told by family courts. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot to be, to have the strength to accept the things we cannot change, have the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Solomon, that is the serenity prayer. And that in itself has kept me grounded and stable. And despite what's going on, I still try to contact my daughter and let her know loving messages, and will continue to do so, and unconditionally. So with that being said, I will say a farewell. I will continue to be watching, and thank you so much, Mary, for having me on again. Nice to meet you, Charlie.
And you, Dolores. And you, Dolores.
Thank you.
All of my my best wishes to you going forwards.
Thank you, Dolores.
You as well.
So much. Thank you so much to New York out there. I hope New York, you're listening. I have a brother that was buried in New Jersey, New York in 1957. He was taken from my mom, but they did make a gravestone. So we're not sure if my brother literally died. We have people investigating today. I have family out there digging up these. We think my brother was sold during the war, the revolution, I should say. And I never got to meet him. And I'm praying that one day we do. So there's so much corruption going on out there that our children are falling into, into trenches, and they can't get out. And without our help, they're never going to get out. But thank you, Dolores. Thank you so much for coming on to Let's Talk on Parental Alienation.
Thank you once again.
My day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm now going to turn the floor to Charlie McCready. Charlie, thank you for coming on. I have my little Molly here, and she will not leave me alone, but I have to put her down for a minute. It's because I have to invite other guests, and my hands are full with her. So I'm going to let you talk. You tell us what your knowledge is and your experience and how you help alienated parents and children today.
Absolutely, very, very happy to. And again, thank you also, Mary, for having me on your show again. It's lovely to be here. Well, it's lovely to be here and be supportive of people. It's not lovely to be here because we've all been through alienation. But I guess as well, your audience is probably quite mixed in terms of some people who are very new to the experience of parental alienation, and it's a very raw experience for you at the very beginning. And you probably have people who, like Dolores, have been alienated for a much longer period and appreciate that this is something that when it happens to us, affects us and our children for a very long period of time. But I'm also keen to bring hope and positivity to parents, because there is a lot you can do to improve your situation. But very quickly, just my own experience. So I separated back in 2009. I had two children who were 16 and 14 at that point in time. I don't provide all the details because sometimes they check in just to see what I'm doing. They're supportive of the work that I'm doing, but I try to depersonalize it slightly. But yeah, so 2009, I separated, and I spent the next 5 years having, in some instances, no contact, but most of the time limited contact with my kids. And I didn't realize at that point in time that actually alienation as a process that had started against me had probably begun about a decade earlier. And Dolores said that the people who are prone to alienation have themselves often been through traumas. I would absolutely agree with that. And it then becomes like an intergenerational problem, because the way that people have been brought up, the way they've been parented, the traumas that they've been put through. So there's a lot of domestic violence, there's alcoholism, there's just people not being really fit to be parents, ending up bringing us up as children. And that is where a lot of these alienators are coming from. And it's because they're traumatized themselves, and they come into their adult lives ill prepared to be parents themselves. They still haven't addressed that trauma, and they have these bullying tendencies or mood swings. They have, I mean, basically what they're doing, trying to do, is protect themselves from that early trauma. And then we marry them, and then when we end up separating from them, that's when we get to see the ugly side. So, they were our life partners. We've told them everything about ourselves, and now suddenly we're public enemy number one. And the best way that they can think of to hurt us is by not giving us access to our children. So yeah, I went through a very, I'm sure, similar experience to everybody else. It completely blindsides you when you start going through alienation. You discover that the courts don't help you. The psychologists can't help you. The therapists, counselors, social workers, family, friends, kind of nobody is really there and in a position of understanding in order that they can give your child and you the support that you really need. So it's a very, very isolating experience. I'm delighted to say that in my particular case, that at the point in time, my kids became less influenceable by their mum, and also they moved out into university or they left home. There was a greater opportunity for me to rebuild my relationships with them. But I'd also learned a lot at that stage about some of the things that you as a parent can do. And this is really, really important, because I think some parents have it in their head that, at the point in time they get these opportunities to rebuild relationships with their kids, that's when they'll go off and start doing the work and kind of learning about alienation. And that's too late. You really need to start learning about alienation straight away. And if you have got contact with your kids, you need to change your parenting style. If you haven't got contact, you're preparing for the point in time that you can re-engage with them. But if you're happy for me just to talk a little bit about that as well, Mary, it's...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So if you want to I think the thing I've really learned, if you want to rebuild relationships with your kids, it has to start with you as the parent. So you have to learn about what experience your kids are going through, and to separate your experience from their experience, because your relationship with them has fundamentally changed. And this means that you need to see things as they're going through it. And alienation is very counterintuitive. So your kids in a very conflicted position. They are not being given permission to see you. They find seeing you can be traumatic, because they've got another parent who's telling them relentlessly what a bad person you are. They also know that there might be punishment involved with seeing you. So their time spent with you can be very difficult for them. And typically as a parent, we don't see it that way. We just assume that, if our kids are spending time with us, that everything's going to be fine again. Well, and that's not the way it works. So you have to start learning how to adapt your behavior so that you really are supportive of your kids. So you can't do things like talk about parental alienation to them. You don't want to put them under pressure. You have to be a lot more lenient as a parent. You can't talk about the injustice of what's going on. So there's a lot for us to deal with in order that we can then help our kids. But it's also, it can be we need to change our mindsets as parents in order to be able to help our kids. And part of that mindset change is also us dealing with our own issues, the stuff that we've been through when we were young and we brought into this relationship when we got married, and we're now bringing into alienation with us, and all of the things that we had from years past. So we might have insecurity issues ourselves. We might not have been sufficiently supported by our parents. We might be a bit self-doubting. We might have some self-confidence. And all of those things come to the surface. All of those insecurities that we have all come to the surface when we're experiencing parental alienation. And we tend to then look to our children for approval and support and love at a point in time they can't give that to us. So we have to deal with all of those things ourselves rather than looking to our children. So it's really hard being an alienated parent. But once you start understanding what you need to do to change, and also giving yourself permission to stop being sad and depressed, that's an enormous step forward. So many people, they are suffering the grief of not being with their kid. They're suffering from guilt because they feel they should do more for their child. And these things are very specific to alienation. They're feeling isolation. They're also feeling worry and fear about what's happening with their children. And basically, we're just a mess for a period of time, probably a number of years. But in the initial phases, I would say the first 1 to 2 years, we're really just all over the place. We can't work, we can't think, we can't operate clearly. But once we start learning how to deal with kind of what our children are going through, what we are, how we deal with our own issues, we can start making some huge changes. And a big part of that is us having the ability to give ourselves permission to get back on with our lives. Because for an alienated parent, that's very hard to do. But we have to do it. We have to do it for ourselves, and we have to do it for our children, because our children don't want a sad, depressed parent trying to help them. They want a person who's an adult, who's a role model. They want to see you happy. They want to see you confident. They want to see you being the parent that you need to be. I was just going to ask, Mary, does that all make sense to you?
It does make sense, but I want to ask you, at what age do you think that these children, I know when they're little, we don't talk about stuff like that, but when they get to adults, mm-hmm. and they're basically the same age as we were when they were alienated from us.
Yep.
Do you believe that, there comes a time they need to know the truth, or they need to understand that what their stories were, mm-hmm. is what got them in that situation in the first place?
So every instance will be different, but so it's really down to the kids. To be honest, it's the simple answer. And kids being adults, when they're ready to have the conversation, then they will drop little snippets into what their normal conversations with you. They'll give you little hints that they're ready to talk a little bit more. I wouldn't advocate a parent trying to talk to your child proactively about alienation. And the reason being that for your kid, they're probably still suffering from the trauma of that experience. They're probably feeling guilty about the fact that they cut you out of their lives for a period of time, and they don't want to revisit that. So only if they start to have the conversation, and even then I would encourage parents to tread very, very carefully and only go as far as your kids want to go. But people have different experiences as well. So one of the things that happens is sometimes a child will just want to detoxify. So they need you to sit there and listen to them whilst they tell you what their experience of alienation was, even if you don't agree with it, just sit there. Let them have that cathartic experience and get it off their chest. Because until they do, they can't move forwards, and then you both can't move forwards.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I'm actually going through that process still with my own children 14 years on, and it's a very gently they will let you know their degree of comfort with how much you can talk about their experience, and I would follow their lead.
I'm in that situation right now with one of them, the youngest, and I mean, she sends a lot of verbal abuse out there, and I'm just trying to correct her to understand that we are traumatized just as much as they are, and that they need to speak to us gently, kindly, and instead of accusations, just tell how they feel and
Mm-hmm.
what they need to hear. But I'm finding it very difficult because everything that my daughter is putting out is so slanderous, and all I can say is that's wrong. It didn't happen that way. This is what happened. She's 32 years old. She would send me messages saying that I had called her names, and I would never. I went back on my messages and I would never call her names, but in her mind, I'm calling her names. But when you read the messages, it's got absolutely nothing in there about calling her anything but I love you. So they're taking the good words out of sense and making it into a bad thing. I'm grateful that she came on because I haven't seen them since the trial. I'm 18 years in. It'll be 18 years this July after 2 false arrests. The trial happened in 2018. We took the stand 2021. But at the time, my lawyer got disbarred just before the trial started. I was scrambling to get another lawyer. I saw my children fall apart on Zoom trial at 34, 33, and 31, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I just said to my lawyer, let's give him an offer. The father should never have used these kids.
Yeah.
And the thing was, too, that my kids are screaming that they never were part of the divorce. And yet, for 18 years, they've submitted affidavits after affidavits after affidavit, suing me and suing me. And they're saying that they had nothing to do with it. Well, who's doing it?
The alienator.
Yeah.
I mean, something that this might help kind of parents in general to understand what's going on. Our kids, because you would think when they get to a certain age that they would kind of mature up and start to see things differently. But for lots of our children, they've basically been programmed. They and people talk about this, but it's true. They've heard the same thing again and again and again and again. And after a period of time, not only do they believe it, but they start self-perpetuating this story in their own head. Now, the reality is we all do this. So I'm just going to give you examples because then parents can relate to this. Our own parents gave us all these rules when we were growing up about what is the right way to live. And guess what? We're still carrying those to a very large degree. We're still carrying a lot of those rules around in our heads, even when some of them were they don't serve us. They were issues that our parents had, maybe around money or their own lack of self-confidence or their own lack of worth. And they gave us all these limiting beliefs. And we're still walking around with them and we're self-perpetuating them because it's the norm. And if you think about it as an alienated parent, as just another example, when we first start experiencing alienation, those feelings of grief, guilt, worry, isolation, it's an emotional roller coaster that we get put on. But after a period of time, the alienator is no longer the person responsible for how we're feeling. It's us. But we continue to have the feelings of, grief, guilt, we're not responsible for what happened, but we still feel guilty for it. We're still very worried about what's happening with our kids, but there's only so much we can do. We're still feeling very isolated. We are still feeling emotionally bruised from the experience, but because we're still thinking in the same way, we're self-perpetuating this this very sad existence that we live at that point in time, the very sad, stressed and traumatized existence. And some targeted parents live in that state for very, very long periods of time because it became normal for them and they started to self-perpetuate it. And so part of what I do is I help to kind of shake parents up a bit and go, why are you doing this? Why are you still doing this? The alienator is no longer present in your life. That they're not putting you under this pressure anymore. You're just doing it to yourself, but it's become the norm. And the same thing happens with our kids. So when they've been in that narrative for long enough, it's now become reality for them, and they're
Right.
self-perpetuating it. So to them, we have one version of the truth. They have a completely different version of the truth, but they don't have that kind of open-mindedness to want to have the conversation.
That is so true. They want to continue speaking their language, what they
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
only, and they don't care about the truth, because you could give them the truth. And like literally, I did, send messages saying, "Look, you said this. Here's your words. Here's your signature. I didn't say that. I didn't write that." So I'm thinking, okay, if you didn't write that, so then the children's lawyers are writing this, typing it. It's not even handwritten because it's not my daughter's handwriting, but they forced the child to put their signatures on it. So really, technically, these children's lawyers are the ones that are breaking the backs of these targeted parents, because they're the ones that are making up the stories. So the children have to abide by their lawyers' words, because they've been committed, they've been locked in. They may have been rewarded with something that we don't even know about, and the kids are not allowed to talk about it. So yeah, it's a very iffy situation out there right now for these kids, because they're growing into a situation where their children, their own children, eventually one day will be alienated. What do they do then?
This is the big risk, and this is where it becomes intergenerational, and you can see it happening. And I think part of the problem that we have is that divorce rates have increased significantly in the last 50, 60 years, and this is actually linked. I did some research on this related on a completely different topic, but part of it is linked to our longevity. And a lot of women are getting much more confident and getting into divorce. So women started divorcing because they realized they didn't want to be with this man who was going to live, they started a life with him. They thought he was going to live till 65. And then they suddenly discover he's going to live for another 20 years beyond that. And frankly, they don't want to be with him anymore. So divorce rates started going up. It broke all the stigma, and then divorce in general became a thing in our society. And prior to that, we didn't really get alienation. It happened in a few instances, but alienation kind of exists now that we're separating on a very frequent basis, and it's a mechanism for the bullies to try and hurt us. Whereas previously, those domestic situations, that bullying used to continue, and one person who had the alienating tendencies and the narcissistic tendencies, they were the bully in the house. Could be the man, could be the woman, and you all just lived with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's all changed.
It has. I remember my ex-husband, he was 18 years old when he told me he was alienated from his biological father since birth. And then he got a new stepfather at 14. And when he had a sister, he was pushed out of the family because the new baby, right? The new stepfather, his stepfather was abusive, an alcoholic. So he paid more attention to the new little one. But at the same time, when he turned 22, when we got married, he didn't want any part of his mom or his stepfather in our homes. Now it was his rule because
Yep.
it's our home.
Yeah.
So what he used to do when he saw his parents coming up the doorstep, he would grab me and drag me into a room so I wouldn't open the door for them. And I caught on. I seriously caught on and thought, you know what? You've been trying to do that with my family, because every time my brothers would come, they would have to drive hours to get to us because we were with the military. So they would drive up to North Bay from Hamilton. Back then in the 80s, it took forever to get from one place to another, right? So when my own brothers would come, he wouldn't let them in either. Or, he'd get drunk and start saying bad things about my family out in the public. So the whole base could hear him shouting that my whole family are effing assholes. And meanwhile, he pushed his way into the family. He pushed his way to have 7 brothers, a mother and a in-law mother and an in-law father, because he saw that we were all a loving family. And once he got that loving family, he broke us apart, trying to do the exact same thing that happened to his family. And then when his alienated when his stepfather, they were having problems with the new daughter. She's 14, drugs, alcohol, normal stuff for a teenage child to go through, as long as they don't get addicted, they're experiencing. But when she was experiencing, the father had a heart attack. This is a stepfather that drank.
Yeah.
His own daughter started drinking. He had a heart attack. He couldn't convince her otherwise not to drink, sent her overseas to visit, to stay with me so she could rehab, but I had no idea. I took her out to dinners. In Europe, you get to drink at 14. Well, when the mom found out that she was having a drink with her dinner, but that I couldn't stop her. She was allowed. She was 14. I'm pregnant. She's getting home safe and sound. Well, didn't they summons for her to come home because she was drinking? But, it also got the father to leave the mom, her mom. But again, she threatened him that if you leave, you'll never see your daughter. Now, she did that with the first husband. She's doing it with the second husband. The
She'll
second
do it with
husband.
the third as well.
That's it. They will continue. They
Yeah.
will continue. So you see all these marriages and you wonder why they fell apart when there's children. Well, you know why? Because they're controlling.
Yeah.
They're trying to control every situation they can to harm you.
But they're also very predictable. I mean, this is one of the benefits and parents, especially parents who are kind of newer to parental alienation, I call things uniquely similar, because you suddenly realize that everybody's going through, that there's lots of common threads, which is really helpful, because it's through those common experiences that we can draw the things that have worked, the things that haven't worked, and we can seek to apply them to our particular situation. So we take all the bits that are relevant and we kind of create our own solution. And to a large degree, that's what I do with the parents that I help. It's drawing from that very broad set of experience and finding things that will work specifically for them. So I lost my train of thought there for a second.
It's easy to do. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah. No, it was just to. No, I've lost it. It was something about helping the parents again. I'll come back in a moment.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So then, so now that it's Parent Alienation Worldwide Day, do you think the judges, the lawyers, because we're raising so much hell out there, do you think that they will ever know that we are on to them and that we want our children back?
I think the system in America seems to be even worse than some of the other countries. I mean, you really seem to be suffering from lawyers who are not being as applying as much integrity as they might. You seem to have quite a lot of bias with the judges. I'm really concerned, and I have to be very careful here because I don't want to make myself a target, but I'm very concerned about the feminist movement as well, because I'm a keen advocate for feminism. You know, my own mum was the breadwinner in our household, and I'm very, very supportive. And they are trying to protect a lot of women from domestic violence. I completely get that. I think that's a really good thing to be doing. But the sting in the tail is that there is also the accusation that parental alienation doesn't exist, because abusive men, they say abusive men are suggesting that the wives are not seeking to protect their children, but actually to alienate them from their children. And I'm sure in a lot of instances that's happening. But I'm sure in a lot of other instances, this is again, it's a very controversial subject. There are a lot of men like me and lots of people that I know who've never touched their wife, never beaten their wife, have done nothing but shown them love and kindness and support. And we certainly, you know, we have experienced parental alienation. It's a real thing. So to hear groups denying it and saying it doesn't exist is very difficult to deal with, and it's typically the people who've not experienced it. And I think that's a big part of the problem with the judiciary. There isn't enough people who are judges who've gone through this that went, okay, I get this now. I can now be representative within my professional community. And it's the same for the psychologists, because there aren't enough psychologists who've experienced this firsthand that have said, this is a real pathology. This is a real thing. And we've had, you know, the Dr. Gardner and his parental alienation syndrome. Well, it's not a syndrome per se, but that's not a reason to kick it out completely. But I think, you know, the judges are relying upon expert witnesses, and the expert witnesses and the support system is the psychological profession. So unless it becomes recognized by that community, I think it's very difficult for the judges to take as much action as they could and should.
Right.
Because if you're a judge, your primary objective is don't make a decision that's going to be overturned by somebody else. That's a big part of what they do. Their reputation is based upon that. So they will make decisions that might not be the best ones for us, but they're not going to be overturned by anybody else.
Right.
It's broken. Right. The whole, and this is everywhere. America's particularly bad, but it's the same story in pretty much every country. I think Mexico is one of the few countries in the world where they have actually made parental alienation legal.
I think Mexico is one. I just heard the other day, I saw something about Mexico is
Puerto
really
Rico is another one.
Puerto Rico?
Yeah. And there's some, you know, there's little pockets of, there's a judge in Israel who's had quite a lot of prominence because he's been particularly successful at identifying and addressing parental alienation.
Right.
Whereas most of the other judges haven't. But it's also a massively difficult problem for you to tackle in the States, because you have to do it on a state-by-state basis. There isn't sort of a federal system that lets you go up and say, right, we're now going to, across all the states, we're going to make it illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So the battle is like trench warfare on a state-by-state basis.
Right. Yeah.
And we have the same problems here in the UK. We've got national newspapers who are deriding the fact that parental alienation exists, purely because they are poorly educated and they've been influenced by people who frankly don't know what they're talking about.
That's right. That's right. We have Legend of Lola. Men and women are finding it easy to get a divorce, and the problem is that people are marrying for all the wrong reasons. And yes, most of them are marrying to get out of the house, to get away from the narcissistic parent, to get away from a bunch of siblings, you know, and that's what happens. We don't really see the real reason why we are getting married.
Yeah.
It's just big weddings, party, you know.
But also a lot of the time we're very young, we're naive.
Yes.
And for somebody who's got sort of those narcissistic tendencies, because a lot of them are narcissists who are prone to alienation, not all of them, but we have this idea in our head, this naive hopefulness that the things that we see, we recognize, and there could be problems later on. We have no experience. Nobody forewarns us. We imagine that everything will be okay. We've been given this mantra from our generation that, you know, people sort things out. They do it within the marriage. They don't get divorced. And it's kind of really been during our generation that all these divorces have really started to manifest themselves a lot more. So we didn't get the benefit of anybody who could kind of say to us, you know, you should be careful about who you marry. And you know, all the mistakes that we made, where we were very, we thought we could change the people and help the people that were damaged, that we married. You can't. But nobody told us that.
And we also had parents that came from the old countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were all immigrants, basically back in the 60s, 70s, coming from all different countries where I am, either in the United States or Canada. And they were brought up that a man would take care of the woman. The woman didn't have to get the education. If they weren't smart enough in school, too bad. The guy will take care of you. And so you get married at 18, 19, 20, 21, 20. You don't know nothing. You're still a child.
You are
Basically,
a child.
our brains are not adult brains until we're 25. So our alienated children are doing it right. They're waiting. You know, my kids are 36, 34, 33 almost. And they don't even have relationships. But it's not that they don't want one. I'm sure it's because they can't, because they don't know how to have a relationship now. So they were damaged the way we were damaged by being thrown into the cage with a wolf. And these kids, our alienated kids, are thrown into the cage to have a relationship, but they don't know how because the loving parent is gone out of their lives.
Yeah.
So they're picking up people that are abusive, alcoholics, drug addicts, and not know it because they're not even educated on the mental health issues that some of these people are dealing with. Because one alienated child will meet another alienated child and they're raised differently, but yet they're going through the same trauma.
And something that I see very commonly as well is that the people who are prone to become alienators, I mean, apart from all the things of lacking empathy and having all their mood swings and everything else, then they don't actually act as a parent because they are very focused on themselves and protecting themselves. They want to control things around them, but they don't actually want to parent. So you or me would worry about, you know, are they doing well at school? Are they, you know, is their health okay? Are they eating properly? All those sorts of things. You know, are they going to bed at the right time? Are they not playing too many video games? You know, the things, you know, we're trying to teach them social skills. We're trying to teach them how to interact with people. We're trying to give them social norms. And the alienators don't do this stuff. The alienators are very lax about what time they go to bed, you know, how long they play video games for. They don't care so much about what's happening with their school marks. And you end up with children that don't have boundaries. And then it's much easier for them to fall into alcohol, drugs. And next thing you know, you've got a kid who is, you know, doing quite well on a path that was going to make them kind of relatively successful within society, just as a nice, normal, loving person. And then because of the influence of the alienator, you've now got a kid who's a problem child.
Right.
You know, who's on drugs, who doesn't understand the social norms, who's flunking out of school. And this then creates the next generation of troubled kids. As in those troubled kids, they're now not going to be given the same opportunities in their own lifetime because of how their own childhood has been messed up. And then they're going to go on to have kids themselves and go through a similar experience.
That's right.
Because they haven't been taught these basic social norms. So it's deeply worrying about the kind of the future trajectory that this has for a great increase in alienation going forwards.
So, what do you suggest we do when that happens to our kids?
This is where we're trapped, because in a lot of instances, we've got the law, but the law doesn't really serve us, and we know that. So the kids really are very unprotected, depending on which part of the states you're in or which part of the world you're in. From the ages of 14 to 16 upwards, the law pretty much doesn't protect them, and it's open game for the alienators. And the alienators do an awful lot of damage before that time anyway. They're often in breach. They move our kids to different parts of the countries.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we do see our children struggling at school, we have somebody who's not prepared to co-parent with us. And in fact, the things that this links in with alienator triggers. So the alienators got a bunch of triggers, and one of them is anything that irritates them. Taking them to court is a trigger. Money is a trigger for them, especially when they have to give us money. Us getting into a new relationship is a trigger for them. They've got a ton of triggers, but every time they're triggered, they take it out on our kids.
Yes.
So when we're trying to co-parent and we notice that our kid is doing badly at school and we raise it with them, they get angry with us, and then they alienate the kids even more.
Right. And that's what I found with my adult children. The more upset the father was, the more he alienated me by using the kids more.
Yeah.
And then the kids didn't want anything to do with me because they saw how upset the father was.
Yep.
And they
exactly.
knew that the father would be upset because they watched it all their lives.
Yeah.
And they know the loving parent would be calm.
They know that their lives will be made more difficult by aligning with the parent who loves them than with the parent who doesn't, because the parent who doesn't love them is going to punish them and give them a hard time and be nasty to them, and also they will withdraw their love and support for them, because it's a conditional relationship. It's almost a transactional relationship, and it's all about that alienating parents' insecurities.
Yes.
We're just passengers. For us who are targeted parents, we are all just passengers on the journey that the alienator, and this includes our kids, on the journey that the alienator is going through. It's the alienator's constant need to protect themselves from the world around them that results in anybody they get married to is going to end up in a bad state, and their kids are going to end up being weaponized.
That's right.
And it's not the fault of our kids, and it's not our fault. It's just these people, these alienators who've been traumatized themselves, that is their life path. And we and our kids were unfortunate enough to have intersected and been part of their journey.
Right. And these alienators are so dead set on their way of living should be everybody's way of living. It's, we have nothing to say. We have no voice left anymore. And that's the sad part, because kids need both parents, no matter what. They need a mother, they need a father, they need to be loved by both. And to have a parent rip a loving parent away, doesn't matter mama or dad, either one, it's a half of the child that's missing. Right?
Absolutely.
And I noticed that when my children were missing their father because of his career. He was gone 6 to 12 months. My children say, oh no, he was home every day. What part of the army did you not understand? Your dad was gone for 12 months. You never saw him. But they don't want to remember that. They want to remember that he was there. So let's not make a big deal out of it. And it's so sad for these kids to be growing up like that. I'm just going to link on. We have Judy in the backstage. So I'm just going to throw her on before I say anything here. Welcome, Judy.
Welcome. Thank you, Mary Kovacs. I want to congratulate you on doing such a phenomenal job on addressing parental alienation today on Parental Alienation Awareness Day, because it's critical people really understand.
Yes, and I'd like to introduce you to Charlie McCready. He does a lot of reunification for our adult children, and I share a lot of his work because I find what Charlie is writing, I got it in my head too, and I know exactly how these children are dealing with. And when I see, I'm so sorry, this cold is just killing me, so I'm not going to be speaking much. But yeah, between you're doing the divorce coaching, Judy, and Charlie doing the reunification, I think you two have a very interesting topic to talk about right now while I add on the other guests. So, anything you want to ask Judy about divorces, Charlie, you go right ahead because I've had Judy on for many segments now. I've been doing this Let's Talk, Real Talk for 2 years. And I have, I'm not saying I'm a whatever, but I do know my children were alienated, and the severity of it was so bad that it was traumatizing to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And when people hear my story, they're like, "Oh my gosh, is this what I have to deal with?" And the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'm very interested, Judy, to know if you are you seeing an increase in parental alienation, and what do you think might be driving this?
I believe part of the problem is people do not know how to function. And I'm going to say something that might shock both of you and the listeners.
Good.
Is parental alienation doesn't have to take place. It can be avoidable. And you're probably wondering, for those who are listening, it can be avoidable. Yes, but it starts in the beginning. It also can improve during the process of where you're at. The key thing that people fail to think about or even taught at the very beginning is, how do we communicate our feelings without aggravating the other side, who also has emotional feelings on the situation, when you be getting to separate from one another, because people get into the anger and they talk through anger. They do not communicate through respect and consideration. And because they can't do that, or they don't have the skills to know how to communicate their anger in an effective, positive way, you're going to find yourself in the alienation world.
Okay. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm going to challenge you a little bit, if that's all right, because I think it's good to have a kind of.
I love challenges.
And the only challenge is that, and I'm kind of going with my experience and the experience of some of the other people, is that some of the narcissistic tendencies of the people that we're with, because I've tried therapy with my ex, and we got, long before when the marriage was beginning to break down, I tried therapy, and she lasted about 15 minutes. And as soon as we got into a subject that was sensitive for her, she was straight out the door.
Well, let me say this. I said in the beginning, one of the keys, and I will add that if they're really narcissistic or very emotional, it is difficult. But the point I believe in, because I had to live it myself and walked it and did it, it is how we communicate with them where they're at, because the key is communication at all levels all the time. But some people are unwilling, like your ex-wife is unable to let go and move past the anger and operate out of anger. Now, my key thing is to say, I could appreciate you being angry and upset. This is an emotional, upsetting way of life for everybody. Why not see what we can come together on so that we can enjoy life and it be a healthier one for our children of any age, because we're always role models. If that still doesn't work, they need to be in therapy with the proper therapist from that standpoint to deal and address their anger. On the other hand, there are some, like my own family, you go against them, it's lifetime. If you were a friend or a business associate, if things can't get resolved, it's cut off for life. And when you hear that, you can't believe that your own family or somebody you loved and cared about is cutting you off for life and cutting off that child's relationship with not just the parents, but the grandparents and the other family members. And sometimes there's just nothing you can do. But I always like to look at it and encourage people to first take the basics of, let's go back to step one. Let's see what we can do to change the dynamics, because somebody's got to make a change. Also, it's not going to happen overnight.
I just think I completely agree with what you're saying, Judy. And also, I'm very open-minded and try to be very positive about kind of the ways we can address this situation. And I think maybe the combination of better education about parental alienation, kind of how it operates, what it does, the telltale signs. I mean, having the opportunity for people who might have that propensity to work with you at a very early point in time could well have a very positive impact and stop it from escalating to the stage that they then won't work with a therapist.
Exactly, because that is my goal. I'm starting a new program, and I'm happy to say my website that was not working well has been transferred, and even our purchasing in a cart, it actually works. So that if you go to the website and you want information, I'm available for you to take a look at the website and see what all is available for single parents, because we have a phenomenal, and right now my understanding is with our nonprofit National Single Parent Resource Center being registered in Florida, we can only operate in Florida until I get more information from the international level in order to provide the program. But it is a video program with a key focus, ironically, on communication and on parental alienation, so that we can reach families before it gets into even the court process and try to avoid even going into court. Because here in the United States, we have collaborative divorces so that you can work together with all the attorneys. And then if it doesn't work, then you go and get your own attorney. But it's a process that can help couples to work together before it escalates into that type of anger.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly getting the key to success is getting to it as early as possible so that it doesn't have the opportunity to become an entrenched position. That's very difficult, especially for a narcissistic person. It's very difficult for them to go back at that point.
Exactly. And that's the key is also, and maybe you have ideas, our listeners may have ideas, how do we reach potential people who may be fighting a lot and heading into the court arena? That's the key challenge, is it because I'm with a 211 here in Florida and they're already in crisis. And then I have people say, well, I wish I knew you back when I got divorced. And so that's the key thing, is how do we reach and find the people who really need us in the very beginning? Maybe you've got some suggestions right here. Maybe one of our listeners might even, make a suggestion here. That's the key. Reaching them before.
I think the answer is Netflix.
Yeah.
And I say that with my tongue slightly in my cheek, but actually it's an education thing, because
It is.
Those of us who kind of experienced it, we never saw it coming. We really didn't anticipate that it was going to get to a stage where the person that we were married to or in a relationship with was going to use our kids against, weaponize our kids. And but there were telltale signs And
I'm glad you said that, because, Charlie, because what it is was we miss those red flags that to make us aware of what to look for in relationships to begin with, and get to know that person and see what are we seeing that could become a trigger as we know that person, if we end up having a relationship, and then if you end up living together or getting married, it's important to really know personalities. And that's what I also get into, because I'm unfortunately but fortunately bittersweet. Is my experience was not with my former husband or my first husband. Actually, it was with my own parents and my brother and his wife and my sister as extension, who are extremely narcissistic, who offered to help me while I was physically ill to have surgeries with my children, and then they were to be returned, only to find out too late that they weren't returning. And I had no idea what the behaviors of my family's dynamics is, to know and recognize, don't even let them go to your family, or you're going to be sorry. And it is true, like you said, it is educational. But the key is, how do we reach them who are maybe going through it and help them learn a new direction in managing, rather than escalating it even worse, because then it gets even worse if the person wants no contact.
And I think that's part of the problem, because again, I'm just going to draw upon my experience, but I think this relates to a lot of people as well. When you're first seeing those telltale signs, you just think it's you. You just think it's you and the person you're married to. You don't imagine for a moment that this is some sort of pandemic situation where tens of millions of people around the world are all going through the same thing. And it normally takes a while before you actually get to that point of realization where, you stumble across something that talks about parental alienation and go, oh, okay, that's what I've been going through for the last 3 years. So I think it's one of those, it's the Donald Rumsfeld, you don't know what you don't know, and trying to educate that group, it either everybody gets it, as in you have to educate everybody. So do you do it through Netflix, because everybody watches Netflix, and make it, interesting, or do you take it into schools?
Well, I will say that in Florida, I can only speak what I know here, is that they actually have a class where they were teaching students how to communicate. And then there was also programs for parents to learn how to communicate. And you don't have to be a single parent to be or anything. It's just being a basic, productive human being. And learning and growing as we should. Of course, so many people don't want to learn and grow. And then they pay the price, because I will say, sadly, there is karma out there. And karma has come around to two of the key parties in a very sad way. But anger you hold on to will kill. It will destroy your body. And two of them, unfortunately, one passed away of a very serious medical condition. The other party in my situation now actually has the same and it's like, wow. Had to be carrying it to a level that they never let it go. And also genetics from that standpoint. But the key thing I want to bring out is, we need to learn and know ourselves, what are our trigger and hot buttons, in order to build a new relationship, to adapt to the relationship, how to communicate, and how to heal our minds, so we're not so angry and resentful for the rest of our lives.
I totally agree with you, Judy. And when I'm helping parents, I basically point them in the direction of 3 things. The first one is, understand what your child is going through, not what you're going through, because your child's going through a completely different experience, and you need to help them in a way that helps them. But the second one is, dealing with the alienators is damage limitation. because you're probably not going to get to a good place with them. In a lot of instances, maybe with support from people such as yourselves, but for most of us, it's just stopping them from doing more damage to our kids. But the third one, and this is where I totally agree with you, it's about us. We are the key to our own healing. We're also the key to helping our kids heal. And unless the change in the way that we kind of rebuild relationships starts with us, it starts inside us and it moves out. Because once we're in a better space,
exactly,
once we're dealing with the grief and the guilt and all these other things, when we're dealing with that better, our lives become better and we're able to help our children.
100%.
Let me jump in there for a minute.
Sure.
I want to say that we just got Andy Martins here. Andy, we have Charlie McCready and
Hi,
Coach
Andy.
Beauty
Hi,
here.
Andy.
Andy Martins from the Andy Martins Show. I'm going to let Andy ask a couple questions, but I have a question for you because most of us have dealt with the same scenario about if you leave, you'll never see the children. If you leave, I will kill you. If you leave, I will kill the children and you. If you leave. Now, people are asking, why didn't you leave any sooner? Well, isn't this what we are saying? That if we had left, we would miss out on our babies?
Well,
No, I stuck it out till my kids were teenagers, and it's still, I got alienated. It doesn't matter what we do. The alienator will, out of revenge, punish us.
that is true, and I agree with it. I know your story well, Mary. The thing is that I look at wherever we are at, if we allow it to be the driving force, our negative situations in life in general, we are not going to get out of that cycle of feeling such anger. It's about building your new life and finding acceptance, and also the hope that maybe one day they will come around. And I'm going to say that because as long as my parents were alive, my children were in and out of my life. Once my parents were gone, my children and I have continued that relationship now for 10 years without interference. And sometimes we may have to wait. It's really sad. It's terrible. It is a heavy heart that we carry, that we may have to wait so long or become a senior maybe, in order for have some sort of normalcy with our children. And I want to tell you, there's another story where a gentleman I knew was divorced, had a relationship with his children. Later on, he ended up losing the relationship with his children. And part of it is, my opinion, is that he displays such anger in his actions at times by not getting what he wanted. On some level, his kids may have had been picking up subliminally, and then obviously the anger that he had been carrying. Because why you have to say why, if you've had a relationship and as adults with your children, then what all of a sudden caused that relationship to become alienated?
David Olson also said, how did your ancestors ever get by?
My ancestors?
I'm not sure whose ancestors he was asking.
Well, I will tell you this. In my family, on my father's side, the alienation was generational.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't know if all my grandfather on my father's side had relationships, but then their children, as they got older, got into arguments and situations and in business together and so on, that the relationship broke apart and they never had a relationship. And I think with one or two of my father's siblings did they finally regain some sort of a relationship. And now my siblings don't acknowledge me as existing, to the point that I'm not even on the family tree. Now, if I allowed that to be my core, I would be an angry person. But by not letting what they do have control over me, I have built an exciting, enjoyable life. It hasn't been easy, But again, it's building and growing your own life in light of what is going on. But I have to say, in the end, by handling the situation with my children the way I did, and then my children finally seeing the dynamic of the family towards the end of my parents' passings because of things that took place, they were able to get a real insight as to the family dynamics. And as my daughter said, we don't look at as everything as a whole or as one. We're able to separate it so the one problem doesn't trigger a total cutoff from one another, like my family and so many highly narcissistic families will do.
Okay. Well, good to know. Andy, want to jump in there and ask a question or give
Hey,
us?
Mary, it's good to be here. You've got all the controls. I'm used to having the controls, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
I
Mary and I have done shows for a long time, and we do one, Let's Talk Real Talk, every Sunday at 8 o'clock. Good to see you again, Judy, and nice meeting you, Charlie. As most of you know, I'm not an alienated parent. I've been with the same woman for 39 years. I know people fall off their chair when they hear that. But having said that, I grew up in a dysfunctional family on my mother's side, and my wife's sister her kids were alienated by the youngest brother, of which I found out this morning. I wanted to get your comments from both of you that after 20 years of alienating these children, he's finally saying, well, maybe these kids should see the mother. And the sister's first husband found out 3 months ago that he has Parkinson's disease at 63 years of age, and maybe they can see their mother and this and that. But the reality is the control will always be with the alienator, with the narcissist. These children will never be the same, even though, the alienator may be letting go, but that may still just be a facade. So I just, if you want to start off, Judy, wanted to get your comments on how the alienator kind of makes people think he's letting the strings go after 20 years.
Generally, it's very hard for the alienator or the highly narcissistic egomaniac type of person to really ever let go in any way. And it's sad because they're losing out on it. As a matter of fact, my brother is in a situation. All right. And it was like, to me, what should I do? It was like, do I write him? Do I call him? It's been 30 years since we've communicated with each other. And I was gonna wrote and I said, no, I'm not gonna write that. It's like, how do I write? But then I had to give real thought. How do I want to handle the ending of a life? And I decided for me, and I think it's valuable, is number one, is it going to make any difference to that person, or is it going to create them to become angry and resentful and hurt them more at a time when they can't afford it? And also, how are you going to feel whether you did or didn't do it? Because what you're doing is, if I was to write, and even if a call could get through, I would be opening up myself to whatever emotions that could come that I wouldn't be expecting. And do I want to have to deal with that? And can I live with that? So the choices really depend upon where you're coming from, and everybody is different. And I think you need to take that into account, and also recognize the alienator will never say or do anything nice because they aren't going to admit anything.
Or if they do something nice, it's kind of, there's some conditions attached to it. And like you said to my wife's brother who called this morning, oh, look what I've done with, my wife's sister's 2 kids. They're great people because I've done it all. I took your kids, and there's that ego, and there's,
Yes.
I've done it all. I'm everything, and you guys are nothing.
Exactly. And I can imagine, because of kids having difficult times when they're caught up in it, is like, we should have kept her, or we should have done this. It's because of you, and blame you. And you're never going to be able to be seen other than it's your fault. And they won't take any type of ownership or understand that your actions contributed to conflict, rather than coming together and accepting our differences and have a relationship so that everybody wins, especially our children, whether they're young or adults. It creates a win.
Right. Why don't you jump in here on that, Charlie? It's just like they're everything and you're nothing. These guys, these alienators, narcissists take the credit regardless.
Well, I was just thinking to your original question. I think there's two things going on when in that particular situation, because it's very unusual that the alienator should suddenly start thinking, oh, I should let the kids have access to other people. And I agree with you. It's normally because they want something, so be very suspicious because they don't change their spots. But even if they do give permission to the kids to suddenly have contact with the family, the kids are not prepared for that, because they've spent so long living in this conflicted, fear-based relationship with the alienator that they don't feel like they have permission to suddenly reunite and be with the other parent or be with the other parent's family. And they might be present, but they're deeply uncomfortable, and they're not really engaging with you in having a proper relationship again. And I interviewed a young lady very recently. She'd spent 22 years without her dad, and she was recalling exactly that experience. She said, I found it really difficult because even though I wanted to be with him, I still had all these emotions and mixed feelings. I felt guilty. I felt estranged from him, although he hadn't estranged her. She was alienated, but she found it really difficult to have that relationship with him. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does, because a relationship is never going to be what you expect or want it to be. And to some degree, when you do have your children have the relationship as adults as well, to some degree, you're kind of walking on eggshells because you don't want to say or something that's going to really set them off and walk away from you again.
That's right.
So,
My wife's sister realizes that, hey, she's not a fool here. It's not going to is suddenly on a dime go back to what it was prior to the 20 years of being alienated.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sorry, Mary, just to let you know, I need to duck out in 10 minutes just
Okay.
with another commitment. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Andy. It's just, and this is one of the big surprises, not just after 20 years, but for parents who've been alienated for a much shorter period, let's just say a few years, where they've had very low levels of contact or no contact. And they expect that they can kind of kickstart that relationship with their children as it was before the alienation. And it doesn't work that way.
No, because 20 years, you don't know your child anymore.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah. And your
well, I
child
have to
doesn't know
say,
you.
it's even 2-3 years. I'll give you
Right.
an example. When I was in court, I'm sorry, fighting the custody battle, it had been 2.5 years since my parents had really interacted with me. And what came up says, well, it's been 2.5 years since you even know your daughter. How do you know what she is today?
That's right. 3 years is tough. Never mind 20 years.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm just saying, even within that, because I tend to work with parents who've been alienated from their kids for those shorter periods, and then have the opportunities to start rebuilding those relationships. And you're dealing with a very different kid. And
Exactly.
there are lots of ground rules that nobody tells you. So, you can't talk about alienation, for instance. And
Well, the thing is, if you bring up alienation to them, they're going to resent you because they're not going to understand or see it.
Well, they don't want to accept the fact that they have actually been brainwashed to some degree, and they don't want to talk about the fact that they've got some duplicity and responsibility for the fact that they sided with the alienator rather than with you. They have, it's not all down to the alienator. They have had a role to play in that as well. And that's really hard for the kids. They were under enormous pressure to be in that position, but they don't want to be talking about that with us as parents. They just want to move on. If they've decided to have us back in their lives, they want a fresh chapter with us.
That you're exactly right. It's Charlie. It's true. They've moved on. They've living their life, and they've learned to adapt to not having that parent and finding substitutes possibly, as well as role models, whatever you want to call it. So it's a challenging situation no matter what time it is.
I want to jump in there. I just want to welcome Bill Edgett, everyone. Bill's been on the show previously as well. Bill is from New Brunswick in Canada. Yes. Charlie, where are you from? Sorry.
I'm from just outside London.
London, Ontario.
No, London in England, UK.
Oh, London, England. Okay, so that's good. We got London, we got Canada, we had New York. Andy's from Sault Ste. Marie. We're pretty close. I'm just outside of Toronto. I don't know why Andy got muted again. What's going on?
I'm in Sault Ste. Marie, the tip of Michigan, right at the top of Michigan.
Judy's Florida. Well, welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Want to Charlie's going to be leaving us soon, so if Charlie can give us his last say in what he wants to, say to the kids out there, his kids, any parent.
Well, I was going to say for the parents, I really like. I try to help people to get into a far more positive state, because alienation really bends our brains and gets us into a very down and depressed state. And I think it's really important for parents to understand that, yes, we are having to deal with the fact that the situation with our children is not as we want it. We miss our children greatly, but it's also really important for parents to pick themselves back up. And I know that sounds hard, but it's really important that you do it, to pick yourselves back up, get yourself back into a better state, because only at that point in time can you actually help. It's because you have to help your children. You also have to help your family, because they're going through their experience of alienation that nobody's helping them. And it's not like a normal experience. If it's bereavement, everybody knows how to pitch in, how to help you, the person who's experiencing it. But with alienation, you're the rock. You are the person that holds it all together for yourself, your kids, your family, your friends. And so I would encourage every parent, go get help with this stuff. Don't try to resolve this by yourself. Go get help from people who know what they're doing or can help you. Please do.
Charlie, you said wonderful words.
Yes. And when I was in my trial, that was the only thing I wanted the judge to know, that if I was going to be awarded any money, I wanted it to go into my children's reunification, to help them in their own personal journey on healing. But it didn't work out that way. And I'm hoping that these judges, when the children do bring back the parents later on in life, because I'm sure most of us are going to be in the same situation as me, because they're going to be going after the parent for money, because they know, they're allowed to now. And this is because they got 2 years. Once they find out they're alienated, they got up to 2 years to file a claim. And I'm hoping that a lot of these kids do come out and say, look, my dad alienated me from my mom. And hopefully that when the kids do come back, the judges are going to say, that's enough. We're damaging kids. Let's stop it and give 50-50 equal share parenting. So what we need is a lot of kids to come forward and say, look, I'm traumatized, because I know I was alienated from my dad for 40 years. I found him on his deathbed. My stepmother kept me from my father. When my father died that day, 4 years ago, she didn't even call me. She did not call me. A stranger had to call me to tell me my dad died. He's dead 4 years. She has never called me once. And yet she said she was a loving stepmother. These step parents need to step forward and say, look, I'm helping these kids. Let's take them to the mom. Let's take them to the dad. Let's take them to the grandparents. Kids need stability. Kids need structure. So that's all I got to say.
Mary, I'm going to jump off, but thank you so much for inviting me today. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job, and also for Judy and Andy and Bill. I mean, all of you guys. you're all just amazing. Everybody who's helping in this space where there's so much trauma with parents, you know, my hat is off to all of you, and my heart is with all of you as well.
And
You're all
also
doing
with
a
you,
good job.
Charlie. You are amazing. I mean, I see a lot of parents. How do I get a hold of Charlie? How do I get a hold of Charlie? So I give them your email address. I don't know what else to say.
Charlie,
Fantastic.
I want to ask you quickly before you jump
Yep.
off the
Yep.
coronation of Charles there coming up next month. You could write a book in England with the soap opera of the royal family. I'm telling you, you know, like it's they're a royal family, but they're like everybody else.
Oh, they are. They are. I mean, it's yeah. I think there's still a great affection for the royal family here, but more recently, as they've modernized, they've kind of lost the plot a little bit.
That's right.
But I'm totally with you, Andy. At the end of the day, they're ordinary people. They're just
they
ordinary
are.
people.
They are. William, I was stunned when I heard that.
A very unusual family.
William wants to be king, and he's already cheating on his wife after 3 kids, allegedly. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
But thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
An absolute pleasure. Love to you all, guys, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.
Keep watching, Charlie.
I will. Oh, sorry. Can I just plug myself very quickly? If people do want to get a hold of me, they can find me Charlie McCready on Facebook. So it's charlie.mccready.39, but Charlie McCready, you normally find me, and also on Instagram. And we do lots of posts to help alienated parents every single day, which kind of insightful and just things that will help you to understand the experience you're going through and things you can do that will help you.
Charlie, what I'd like to do is just give you my web. Charlie, I just wanted to give you my website. Anybody who's listening, because I have a website where people actually download wherever you're at, and it's coachjudy.info, and then you click on single parents, and that'll take you to all the areas for single parents. So if you want to check it out, Charlie, you're welcome to.
I will.
We're here.
I'll absolutely do that, Judy, because I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. I think you're doing some really great work.
Thank you.
Also in the comment box, leave your emails and your contacts in the comment box, and people can look you up there.
You can contact us.
Okay.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you have a very productive and effective Parental Alienation Awareness Day for the rest of the time. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Charlie.
I'll see you soon.
All right.
Charlie.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to get Bill to weigh in here. He waited patiently. Hi, Bill. Thank you for joining us here on Let's Talk.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. So what's happening with you? I know you've been alienated from your children. It's been a struggle with you as well.
Yes, it is. And a lot of the information Charlie was saying to conclude there is stuff that I need to do for myself to be healthy, not just for me, but for my family and children, like he was saying. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I've been in this process for about 8 years now, and it's a struggle every day. And I helped run a number of support groups and tried to provide information about the process of alienation, the court system, the barriers people suffering from alienation will face throughout the court system, and how they can try to get around those barriers or get through them and get their cases recognized and properly handled. I'm still working on doing that myself and trying to document the process, what has worked for me and what hasn't, so that I can share it with others. It's an ongoing process, and after 8 years, I don't know that I've learned a lot. I'm much more educated about this process. I'm equipped to understand what I'm going through, what my children are going through, my family's going through, but it's still very difficult, even being aware of how to move forward and make your life better and make everything better for your family. It is still a very difficult process. And I want people to know that you need some support in doing this. I spent a lot of years doing a lot of research, and while I have a lot of knowledge and I've been representing myself pro se, it's still the effects of this process is still spreading to my family and children, and it's for a number of years I managed to keep joint shared custody of my children, and my children had a good, healthy relationship with them. But the process has worn me down so much that that's starting to degrade now, and I have to start working back at making myself better so I can help everyone around me as well.
It's important to stay healthy, fit, physical, mentally, emotionally. It is the most hardest thing to go through. It's like
Yes.
allowing a pedophile to come and steal your child, or a terrorist come steal your kid. It doesn't have to be, it could be anybody. It could be a murderer. It could be anybody. And that's how we feel. Our alienators don't want us. That's okay. If you don't want us, that's fine. But we want the children. And
well, I think to throw something out, Mary, is I think part of it is that they also feel threatened, especially if you've gone on and built a life. They feel threatened.
yes.
And they don't want people to know what really goes on in their family for whatever reason it may be. And they don't like us being forthright and speaking up and speaking out. But
Yes.
it's like it's not your fault. They're the ones who have created the unwillingness in the situation. It's something that they just have to endure because they're responsible as well.
And that's so true, because to come back to my trial, the only reason why the ex-husband brought me back was because A, I had a man. I had a 8-month relationship, and boom, he jumped on me. B, he saw me on TV playing my saxophone. 3 days later, I'm being sued. So no matter what we did, if we were, they say we were bad, we weren't, but they're going to make us look bad. And then when we do good, it's not good enough. It's oh, how dare you insult me because I told everybody you were a rotten mother. But here you are spreading awareness worldwide. So, the mentality is they don't care. Damned if you do and damned if we don't.
Well, that is so true, because I know, like, my mom, when she was still alive, she said to me, Judy, how can you go out and help parent with how terrible you did? Because that's in their mind. And it's like, well, I did the best under the circumstances. Like, people worked against me even before I let my children go to family to help. I didn't realize it, but they were working against me before then. So It's like, that's their personality. That's the way they are. But the key thing, and Bill especially, is if you can really love and value yourself and try to close out what they think or feel, they may help, because they're never going to see you in the light that you really are. And because my parents say you're mentally ill and this and that. And it's like, and I look, it's like, if I was mentally ill, could I have achieved all the things I have done over the last 30 years and managed to maintain a good mindset and working with different people as well if I was mentally ill? So it's like really letting it go from them. Just keep you, and you're building your own life, and it will ease. And there are times when birthdays, holidays, that you're going to remember, you're not going to forget, and you're going to feel it, but don't.
Well, this looks
Who
like
would expect you not to?
frozen. Oh, there we go.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. I have a question, Andy. How long do our videotapes go for?
Well, I think we're gonna have to switch over to my show for the other pieces of it after 5:30, because I think you're all right, but I think you're getting to the edge of it right now.
Okay.
Per day, so
we're an hour and 33 minutes in.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go longer than 2 hours.
Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
Because then your time period, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, thank you. I'd just like to go on about what Judy was talking about with the mental health issues. People are, it's got a negative connotation. People that suffer from this process, parental alienation, it's not so much they have mental health issues, it's as that they're suffering from trauma. They're being traumatized. They were in an abusive relationship and suffered severe parental alienation before they were ever aware they were a victim of any form of abuse. And that just carries over once the courts get involved, because that party is already experienced at aligning people with their narrative and getting their way. An example for me would be two of my closest friends helped my ex empty out my house while I was at work. So, these were two very close friends of mine. And actually, she is currently living with one of them and has been since we've separated.
Oh.
So it's again, that's almost par for the course. Almost everyone I speak to, it's a friend or a relative or something that again, a close personal friend of theirs that they've managed to manipulate and turn against them. And that's what it's all about, is control and isolating their victims, so they don't have anyone to turn to. And it's a brutal process. And I was fortunate. My parents were very supportive and helpful. And without them, I wouldn't have made it through this process and be where I am right now. I'd probably be without my children and homeless. It's a devastating process. And even though my parents are very loving and kind and supportive and have done everything they could to help me, like you were saying, Mary, and you yourself, Judy, you have people that are very close and supportive to you, but they say, well, you have these mental issues. How can you be a good parent? How can you do this? And again, these are people that you're looking to for support, and they're unintentionally traumatizing you further because they don't understand the process you've been through. And without having that insight, it's something they can't relate to. And without being able to relate to the situation, they have to assign blame one way or the other, and they think it's partly because of you, partly because of the other. And they don't know that it can be very one-sided, this entire process. And
it's true. Bill, I want to say something so that everybody knows.
Certainly.
Get that is that lots of times, like in my situation, I had physical problems, needed 2 surgeries, but in my parents' mind, they weren't willing to accept the diagnosis my mother's brother-in-law, who was my doctor, gave me over 50 years ago. And they wanted to see it as you got mental problems. And yet, no, it's physical problems that made it difficult. And of course, the stress you're adding doesn't help, but it was not mental issues. But that's how people want to make things. If you have a physical disorder, they don't accept it for them to say mental. The other thing is, it's important that when you are going through custody, they are going to use mental, they're going to use physical, they're going to use financial, they're going to use anything they can. But those are like the 3 or 4 main areas that they'll use against you no matter what. Because in my situation, once the judge ruled that my daughter was going to be returning, there was a huddle between the family and their attorney about we could go, appeal it, but they chose not to. But they never changed their mindset, especially when they saw all that I was achieving. In their mind, it was like, you're mental, you really don't know how to do things, and so on. So you have to look at the total picture of your situation, because we all share a common denomination, emotions, feelings, situations, but they're also all very different in different ways because of different people.
But Judy, they'll flip it on you. You're the one with the problem. You've got trauma. You've got the mental health issues. But in reality, it's the narcissist or the alienator that has the problems. But it's never their fault. It's always your fault, kind of thing.
Well, it's built into their personality and the mindset of narcissistic behaviors or highly narcissistic to somebody who is more like giving and caring and thinks of the other person rather than themselves first. Because we need to remember that a narcissistic person feels that they are in many ways superior and better, and they have to maintain that image to everybody else.
That's right.
Yes.
And we've even had people manipulate us on the show, Mary and I, and we've made a decision that no more. The only hosts on this show, on her show and my show, Real Talk, will be Mary and I. There's no more manipulating. If you start in negative and blaming other guests, you're done. We're not putting up with this nonsense anymore.
Well, and I think that's great. And it's also being able to recognize that and take steps. People could recognize it, but they don't have the guts to take action. And they over and over. And it's so important that we
Right.
recognize the patterns and we learn how to break those patterns.
That's right.
We have
Exactly.
positive energy that everybody needs.
Don't try and test us, because Mary and I are the only ones that make decisions for these shows. So, and these people are traumatized. They'll try anything. We've seen it all over the years.
That's in everything. I know somebody in the media industry and what she has gone through, and because she's a nice person and what they did to her, they didn't care. It was about them. So we're going to deal with these type of people in our workplace, in our families, as friends who we then decide to let go, and so on. And again, I always go back to this, in ourselves. Who are we? What are we willing to accept? And what do we know and can do to change and build what creates happiness for us?
That's right. We're trying to save Mary's voice. She's got a cold today. Bill, I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with all the stress and holding a job, putting food on the table, courts, knowing that it's like you must be carrying bricks on your shoulders 24/7 out there in New Brunswick?
Yes, it is. It is a very difficult process. No one wants to go through this, but the best explanation or solution I can give to you is you do this because you have to, and you have no other choice. There really is no other choice. I love my children, and I would do anything for them. So
Right.
I don't have any choice. If I want to keep them in my life, and I want to try and be a good role model and parent to them, then I just have to do this. I don't have another option.
Well, that's right. And you have to do what you do. I would do the same thing. The luckiest thing that ever happened to me, because my wife's sisters and kids got alienated by the youngest brother. Before that happened in 2004, I moved here to Sault Ste. Marie. In 1990, I was too far away, 410 miles northwest of Toronto. They were coming after me.
So yeah, it's a very difficult process, and
Yeah,
you need some supports. I help, like I said, I help run a number of support groups, and I have people reach out to me quite regularly, and I've tried to help numerous people, but it's almost therapeutic knowing that I've been through this trauma, but because I survived it and I've learned from it, I can help others so they don't have to go through what I've went through.
Right.
I can make it
and
better
I've
for them.
seen through Mary showed me some of the stuff from her daughter. It's just mind-boggling that these people would do that. It's just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it before.
You see the worst in people when it comes to this, because they're fighting for emotions, and emotion is very strong, no matter what emotion it really is. And I know for myself, I'm like, thank God it taught me so much about me and about human behavior and how to be positive, that when I was going through some extremely difficult times and I didn't know if I was going to make it, nothing to do with my children or anything, it was like, how do I hold on? And I found, and I teach this a lot, is what can you find that is positive to become your anchor so that you can hold on to that as a mindset. so that you can function in a more positive way rather than hanging on or think about all the anger things. What's my anger? What can I build on that and on different areas? Because there is a silver lining in everything that we're doing, because although everything we've gone through has been painful, but the thing is, we have learned from it. We're changing and touching people's lives. That's the positive to hold on to when you're feeling down. And even for myself, it's like, well, I'm not doing a whole lot right now because of this and this. I understand. I'm working on it. But at least I've touched lives. People have made me feel good because I've put smiles on their faces. And that's what life is all about, is helping people and helping people feel good, creating, as I call it, homeostasis, an equal balance, and not letting our differences get in the way of having healthy, functional relationships.
But Judy, you're doing that because you've gone through hardships yourself. And I can't tell you how many times Mary and I have seen that. People are helping people not because of what they've gone through themselves, and they do good as a result of that.
And that's the best thing. I'm sorry. That's the best thing that we're all doing, is that we are helping others. I mean, here we're now connecting. I know Andy from the show before, and now I've met Bill. I met Charlie. I may have read the name on Facebook. Now we're putting face to face. It's like new beginnings always if you're putting yourself out there, and that's what's great.
And what I want to say too, when our alienated children get to grow up, they seek friends who will comfort them and say, "Oh, you poor thing, your mom was an evil person. I had an evil mom too."
That's right.
So
they want to become the victim. Yeah.
They want to become the victim, and that's the problem out there, because they are gathering a whole bunch of people that they think are supporters, but they're not supporting them.
Well, but they are supporting them in their needs at that time.
Validation. They're getting the praise. They're getting gifts because they are left out. They're not getting what they're supposed to be getting, but they're being. I don't even know how to say it.
But the thing is, you can't change the other people that are doing this. And it's really coming to terms and just accepting this is the way it is. There's nothing I can do. All I can do is for myself. And because, like yourself and everybody is on, you've got a good mind and you're doing something. And that's what's key to be focused on.
Right.
And really accepting it completely, because there isn't anything that you could change and do right now. Focus on your life, build your life. And at some point, hopefully they themselves will begin to see it. If they don't know, it's their loss, but you've built this whole life. I mean, I lost my entire immediate family, my sister. I have a great niece I'll never see. Okay. I have my nephew. I lost my nephew, and I lost everybody in my immediate family. Okay. It's just me and my two children. But if I allow that to be my world, then I wouldn't be talking like I am and as strong as I am. So that's why I say you really got to focus and move on and past it and accept it. And if they come into your life, that will be a wonderful surprise. But if we harbor it, it's going to be much harder to really move forward. That's my opinion, and you take it for what it's worth. But that's how I see, because I could be very angry at everybody and see them in an angry light when I see similar personalities, but I don't let that have control over me.
That's right. I was just going to say, if I added Mary's daughter and brought her on this show one-on-one with me, I wouldn't allow her to play her to make her the victim, because I know the truth. So she would never last on this show with me, maybe 15 seconds, and she'd start with her emotions. So these people, they want to be the victim. It's all or nothing. They don't accept it any other way.
Yeah, she's already written to me. I've invited her to come on to Let's Talk. She refused. She also told me that I will never see my grandchildren on my Parental Alienation page. It's written. And that she will make sure her children, when she has them, she's 32, no children yet. When she has her children, she will make sure that the child knows that I, a grandmother, the children will know that I was an abusive mother and how badly I treated them daily. Now, for 18 years, I raised the children alone with never an incident. But all of a sudden, she gets to say this. But that's so wrong for our kids to grow up that way. Molly, please. But Jan
It
Kula
is
had
wrong, but we can't. Sorry.
wrote that alienating parents who always fight at something. Is it your children? It's the dog. It's not the dog. It's the cat. And that's true. They, when you agree on one thing, they'll find something else to complain about, or to tell stories that you did this or you did that. David says, yes, just like this Stalin did. Yeah, my parents grew up in that time. And I brought in a story one day. I don't even know how my kids found it, or they were probably listening to a podcast, and they used victims from the war for their pain. I told my daughter, you don't go using other people's pain to cry alienation that I was the abuser. I wasn't there in 1944. I was born in 59. It wasn't me. So they're making up all these stories about abuse that never happened. So
Well, they got to find something to identify with. See what it is? They're trying to find something that they could identify with to you in order for them to cope. This is what you can realize. They've got their coping mechanisms that's not healthy, but that's where they're at.
That's because they're lacking empathy, right?
Right.
They don't know how to feel. They don't know how to feel the pain because they're being coerced by the alienator to hate. That's all the emotion.
But also they will wall themselves to protect themselves. Yeah. Is what people will also do. If it's too painful, you have to retreat on some level, which is meaning you don't want to feel those emotions.
Right. We've got about another minute or so. I just want to get Bill's last words in here, and then Andy's and Judy, because we're going to switch over to Let's Talk Real Talk for 5 p.m. tonight. Is that okay, Andy?
Yeah, but I'll have to step off, but we can, can take it by yourself on that.
When? At 5?
5 o'clock, I'll create a deal, and you can, while I'm gone, you can handle it on your own on the other platform.
Will I be able to put people on? Or should I reconnect with Let's Talk?
Yeah, you should reconnect, and then we'll do my platform at the end until 8 o'clock or whatever.
Okay, we can.
Yeah, because the controls are whoever's it is, so no, you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to do it this way. But I just want to say thank you to Bill, to Coach Judy, to you, Andy, to Charlie, Dolores, everybody that's been on today. This is truly what we need to put out there, because parents think that this is a joke. This is not a joke. This is serious stuff. Our kids are suffering. And my Facebook page is full of it. And I'm trying to calm my children down, and I can't. They're the ones that's bringing me to court. Is it to seek some kind of comfort that they saw me, or what is it that's going through their head? We don't know, but I'd like to find out why my kids, one day they're looking for me, the next day they're not.
I can only say, Mary, as a professional, is I would just let it go for now and don't waste your energy on it. Put your energy into the positive things. I did want to give my website out. It's www.coachjudy.info. It will link you to the National Single Parent Resource Center. It's a site that I cannot change or do anything with. So we have a new page on coachjudy.info. And remember, everyone, get the facts, act. You'll achieve success, but find the positives in everything, because there really is one.
Right. Bill, what do you got to say before we leave?
I'd just like to say thank you for having me on. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Judy, for taking part in this and trying to spread awareness about the process of parental alienation and providing support for people. people really need the support to get through this process. If anyone would like to contact me, they can Bill Edgett at Facebook. Feel free to message me. I've put my number out there publicly for people to call me, and I've gotten calls in the middle of the night, and I'll try to help in any way I can to anyone, because I know how difficult and traumatic this process can be. So remember, you're not alone. There are people that care and know how to help you through this process. So go out and look for them, and they'll be helpful.
I just want to add that I am also, I always forget, I am on Facebook under Judy Romanoff and under National Single Parent Resource Center. Sign up and join, and let's get these communities going and supporting one another.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to, don't jump off. I'm going to have to end the show. I got my hands full with this little lady here, I tell you. I should have been born an octopus, like I always said to my kids. Mommy doesn't have 8 arms. But thank you, everyone, grandparents, alienated children, alienated moms, dads out there. Don't give up is all I got to say. And then we'll be back on in 15 minutes on Let's Talk. We're going to take a break, and we're going to get new guests on, and we're going to go till 6. And then from 7, I guess, we're going to jump on with the Andy Martin show. Okay? Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.